The first piece on the program is a rather special piece because PDQ Bach realized that he couldn't make a living as a composer, so he had a traveling medicine show, and he went around selling dubious medical miracle cures to people, and it really went well. He came home a wealthy man, and the secret of his success, I think, was the fact that he had a singer named Enrico Caruso with him, and he wrote songs about his products for Enrico to sing. So PDQ Bach, among the other annoying things he invented, seems to have invented the singing commercial. And this Hear Me Through is one of the first singing commercials there ever was.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe talk about you know, your thought process of putting yesterday's show together.
Well, one of the things I like about live shows is I love the recordings, doing the recordings, but one of the things I like about live shows is you can do visual humor that you just can't do on the records, you know. It's lost. And some of the records that were recorded live in front of an audience have laughs that when you hear them on the record, you don't know what it's about. We tried to edit those out wherever we could, but sometimes you just can't. So I love the visual things. In putting this program together, it really had a lot to do with it's regarded as a chamber program. It's not. I have some programs I do with symphony orchestra, but this is a self-contained program, and so most of the music is vocal, and that gives you another range of humor. It's not just the weird things that the music does, but the words to the music can be a source of humor too. So, and I have a wonderful bunch of people working with me. One thing that some people misunderstand is they say, "Oh, he's a lousy musician. That'd be perfect for PDQ Bach," but it's not true. It's actually the better the musician is, the funnier it is. And I've got a pianist and two singers there who are just very fine performers. And they, like myself, like doing both serious and funny things. So we all have a very good time.
Might as well bring up the names of the kinds of singers. I mean, there are basso profundos and basso blottos.
Yeah,
now this is the tenor profundo.
Yeah, the tenor profundo is Brian Doherty, and the off coloratura soprano is Michelle Eaton, and Margaret Kampmeyer is the pianist, and then a part of the show is always Bill Walters, who is the stage manager, and in some of the shows has a bigger part than he does in this show, but it's in doing the program many times as we have, things sort of develop, and you drop things that don't work so well, and you keep things that I often do something on the spur of the minute, and if it works out well, then I keep it in the show, you know. So it's I like performing more than once or twice, you know.
Okay, I think I don't mind going right to the beginning now. Okay, so well, I mean, I've known a lot of your music over the years, and I think I even saw you conduct the Schlepptett in E flat here at the NAC, if I'm not mistaken.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah, but let's go right to the very, very beginning and your influences in childhood. I was a choir boy here at St. Matthew's Church, where I don't know if you know Gerald Finley.
Yes,
yeah.
I know of it.
We're good pals. We grew up together in St. Matthew's. Dan Taylor, who sang last night from St. Matthew's, we all kind of grew up together. So I know what kind of how important that kind of early influence is, and I just wondered, you know, you must obviously get a piano background. You have a vocal background before all the composition came about. Can you go right back to the beginning?
Well, I got into music a little bit backwards. I was not a child prodigy at all. I wasn't particularly interested in music. I mean, I loved listening to the Peter and the Wolf and everything, but I was not interested in making music until I was about 12. But I was a Spike Jones fan, and for the younger people listening, Spike Jones had a comedy band in the 40s and 50s primarily, and he did takeoffs on popular songs of the day and also on some of the very popular classics like Carmen and the Nutcracker Suite. And the best stuff is really good. I still love it. And I became a Spike Jones freak because I was theatrically oriented as a kid. I had a theater in the basement of our house, you know, and I wrote plays that we put on. And Spike Jones had a very funny traveling show that he did. I mean, it was the end of vaudeville, really. And I saw that show twice. And so I put together a little band called Jerky Gems and His Balmy Brothers, which consisted of 2 clarinets, violin, and tom-tom, because that's who I knew. And I started writing arrangements for that combination in imitation of Spike Jones. I'm very glad that there weren't any video cameras around now, because I think they'd be embarrassing to look at, those things. But what happened during my teenage years is I got more and more interested in music for music and not just for a vehicle for comedy. And by the time I went to college, I say by the end of my first year in college, I knew that being a composer is what I wanted to do, but I never lost that urge to make people laugh, which I've always had. My mother once told me I've been entertaining people since I was 18 months old, and I told that to a musician in the PDQ Bach Orchestra, and she said, "What took you so long?" You know, so it's just the kind of thing that you're born with, and you develop it, but it's not something that you decide to do. And I think it's true if you look at Victor Borge and Anna Russell and other musical comedy acts. They all studied seriously. You know, Victor Borge studied to be a pianist, and Anna Russell studied to be an opera singer. The basic thing is that you have to make fun of what you like, usually, because that's what you understand, and you have to understand it to make fun of it. And political humor is a little different, but I think most humor, you make fun of what you like, not what you don't like.
I think it's interesting that, I mean, there's not very much. You mentioned Victor Borge and Russell. I think of you two as sort of Hoffnung come to life.
Yeah, I heard Hoffnung's records, the 3 that I think were on Angel. At least I heard the first one while I was still in college. And as you know, Hoffnung was not a composer himself. He was a catalyst, and he got people to write pieces. I wish I could have seen one of those concerts, but he was certainly an influence along with Spike Jones, and I think more of those two than Victor Borge. I loved Victor Borge, but most of his humor was really verbal. Part of his shtick was that he never got around to playing the piano, and the talking was where most of his humor was. But I don't know, after a while, things start taking on a life of themselves, and people have asked me often if the fact that PDQ Bach became so popular compared to my serious compositions, if that's a hassle for me. But I just have a very relaxed attitude about it. I'm fortunate enough to have commissions for serious pieces as well as PDQ Bach discoveries, and so I don't worry about it, and I love doing both. I would be unhappy if I couldn't do funny pieces, and I'd be unhappy if I couldn't do serious pieces. So I consider myself a pretty lucky man.
So some of your teachers were, I think, Herseketti.
Yes,
And
Roy Harris was on there.
You studied with Mio, Darius Mio.
I studied with Mio in Aspen one summer, and I would say that of the composers I've studied with, he was one of the least of an influence on me in teaching, not because he wasn't, I mean, he's certainly a very facile and fine composer who knew what he was doing, but he had a class that was about 20 people, and the class was all levels. I mean, there were, Mort Subotnick and I were already fairly experienced composers at that time, but there were people in that class who were still having trouble reading bass clef, you know, and so it just there was a lot of wasted time if you already had some knowledge. So that wasn't my favorite learning experience. I would say I learned more from Roy Harris and Vincent Persichetti, but I was glad to be around Mio because there's some Mio pieces that are very important to me, and he was funny because he suffered from terrible arthritis, so he often sort of had a grimace on his face, but he said one time somebody brought in a piece. It was just a short little and rather inane melody, and then he just repeated the melody again, except a third higher. And Mio said, "Oh, my boy, it is as if you were to tell me a story, and then you tell me the story again, and I protest. I say, you have just told me this story." And you say, "Yes, but this time I am standing on a chair." And so, you know, these little sort of bursts of wit were fun to be around.
And Philip Glass was one of your classmates.
Yeah, he was one of my classmates and friends, and
I should have you start again and say
okay.
Philip Glass was...
Okay, yeah. Philip Glass was a friend and a classmate, and I used to teach a fourth-year ear training class, and I was about the same age as most of my students, and Philip was one of the students, and there I was the teaching fellow, and so we had a lot of fun. It was the fourth-year ear training class was fun to do because it was only required of composers and choral directors and conductors, because those people, and the thing that made it easier was the fact that those people at least know they should have a good ear. I mean, a lot of violinists and singers, they don't see why they should take ear training, but those people know that they should have a well-trained ear, and they should be able to know what they're hearing. And so we could relax and have a good time without losing a sense of what we were doing.
So did your parents make you take music, or how did all that work?
When I was 8 years old, my parents said I had to study piano for one summer, and if I didn't like it, I could quit. And I didn't like it, and I quit. And then about 4 years ago, and then about 4 years later is when I started putting that little band together, and I got very interested in music. Same thing happened with my daughter. She took piano for a while, and then she sort of figured out how you write music down and everything, and she lost interest. And I thought, well, that's it. She's not going to be involved in music. But now she runs a rock camp for girls, and she writes songs and sings in a couple of groups. And so you never know. But I was certainly not, as I said before, a musical prodigy. It took a while.
Okay. Oh, yeah, let's get into, and this is kind of off the beaten track, Joan Baez and Buffy Sainte-Marie.
Okay.
You arranged some music for them, and what was all that about?
Well, from 1961 to 1965, I taught at Juilliard, taught ear training and some other courses. But I quit in 1965 because I wanted to be free to tour with PDQ Bach. The first public PDQ Bach concert was in April of 1965, and I wanted to be free to go on tour. Little did I realize it would take about 7 years to figure out a way to go on tour and make money. I would go on tour and come back poorer than I was when I started. But I did quit teaching, and so I had to do other things, and I did pretty much whatever came along. I was looking for a Beethoven sonata once in my record collection. I pulled out a record and looked at the liner notes, and it was by Peter Schickele. I'd completely forgotten that I used to write liner notes for some record albums. But I did like to do arranging. I like arranging because it's you're bringing something to something that's already there, but you're trying to sort of put your own personality on it too. And the first PDQ Bach album was on Vanguard Records, and Joan Baez was on Vanguard. And somebody at Vanguard got the idea of doing a Christmas album with Joan Baez with the arrangements sounding like the period that the song actually came from. So that an old song like Lule, My Child would have Renaissance instruments, and a song like Joy to the World, which is 18th century, would have violins and flutes and 18th century instruments. And because of PDQ Bach being involved with imitating another style, they thought of me as the arranger. And the album turned out nicely, and so I ended up arranging 2 more albums of hers and also composing some material that she sang on an album called Baptism. And we had a very nice arrangement, which is that she didn't tell me at all what kind of arrangement she wanted. She didn't say how to do the arrangement. And if she didn't like it, which happened I think twice, if she didn't like the arrangement, I either did another one or we just left it off the album. We always recorded more than we could use. Buffy Sainte-Marie was a little bit different. Buffy Sainte-Marie is also very talented, but she wanted to try to tell me what she wanted in the arrangement to the point that I felt a little stifled. So I didn't feel that the arrangements for her came out as well. And I did some singers that you've never heard of and whatever came along. But then around 1970, all those folk singers decided they wanted to be country stars. All the folk singers went down to Nashville and started doing their records down there and doing a different kind of arranging. So that was an activity that ended pretty quickly, around 69, 70. And by the mid-70s, PDQ Bach was making me a living. And I stopped. I did a couple of film scores during the early 70s, and the only one released by a major studio was called Silent Running with Bruce Dern, and a sort of ecological science fiction picture. And I love doing film scores, but the problem with film scores is they always want you to start next week. And if you've got a concert schedule of 60 concerts a year, which I had at one point, you can't just pick up and go to Hollywood for 6 weeks. So I've done very little, and the last one I did was a lot of fun, which was the film score for an animated version of Where the Wild Things Are, animated from the book. And I could do that because it was only an 8-minute film, So.
Yeah. So you worked closely with Douglas Trumbull, just out of curiosity.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
He's one of my special effect heroes.
Okay, yeah.
And just on the serious side a little bit still, I was just curious about influences. Obviously, you're influenced by American composers, Aaron Copland, that sort of thing. But what about more universal, international, Benjamin Britten, Shostakovich, Bartók?
Yeah, all 3 of those are among my favorite composers. One of the things I like about Shostakovich is that he will sometimes have, within the same piece, he'll have something very serious, and then later something that is just like circus music or something. He doesn't have that feeling it has to all be serious. And one of my favorite pieces of his is his 6th Symphony, and the first movement is this long, slow movement. And then there's what you might call a traditional scherzo that's witty and nice. And then the last movement is just sort of movie music and circus music. And I love that. But I would say among the older composers of the canon, Schubert and Brahms are 2 of the composers that have influenced me most, and also Mozart. And we just did a concert this afternoon that had a piece of mine that I think of as being very Brahmsian in its gestures. And obviously Bach was an influence too, not only in the PDQ Bach, but just in the music. But there's something about the lyricism and the sort of soaring romanticism of Schubert and Brahms that really speak to me. And among the more contemporary composers, Stravinsky was a huge influence.
Britain, just out of curiosity?
Britain, yeah, Britain. I don't know as much as I know Stravinsky, but I'm a big fan of a lot of the pieces that I do know, and I also like the attitude he has of writing music for all sorts of things, for kids, and writing music for churches, and just making music part of everyday life. And I'm very much with him on that score.
And my favorite's Peter Grimes.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. Yeah.
And the Ceremony of Carols is wonderful.
Oh, it's tremendous.
Yeah.
I used to sing those actually. Yeah. Well, what about in your oeuvre? Well, I should say PDQ Bach's oeuvre. As far as favorites, I have to say that I think because of the performance on the recording, Iphigenia in Brooklyn is one of my absolute favorites. But I've done the seasonings. Of course, I've sung My Bonnie Lass once with you even. The Schlepptet is great. There's the Beethoven Ninth business. And so
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you think are some of the more successful of the PDQ oeuvre?
Well, I think there are about 100 pieces by PDQ Bach now, and so that's an awful lot of them. And the most successful ones, well, let me just say that you can't sit down and plan to write the most successful piece. It just doesn't work that way. You do the best you can, and sometimes it really comes out great, and sometimes it comes out not so great. And if it really is not so great, I hold it back. I don't even use it. I don't release it. But Iphigenia in Brooklyn is certainly one of my favorites, and the seasonings, and also Oedipus Text, another oratorio. One of my favorites that isn't done very often is the only full-length opera, The Abduction of Figaro, and this was premiered at Minnesota Opera, and to me it's one of the perfect PDQ Bach pieces, and if that sounds like bragging, I don't mean that it's perfect as a work of art, but what I mean is that it's perfect in what my intention is in doing takeoffs, and that is that it's a love letter to Mozart's 5 big operas. It's a love letter to The Abduction from the Seraglio and Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni and The Magic Flute and Così fan tutte. And so it's both a takeoff on them, and but you know that I love this stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons that most professional musicians get a kick out of PDQ Bach. People often think, oh, professional musicians are can't like that stuff. They tend to like it, and I think it's because they recognize that it's a satire of love, not a put down.
Is Figaro in this case is it a baritone?
Yes, Figaro. Well, Figaro actually is a speaking part. I think he has 3 words. I think maybe it's only 1. It may be that his only word is Cuba. That's it. But he's on his deathbed, and he gets kidnapped by a pirate. What can I tell you?
And you've had, dozens of, hundreds of PDQ performances, I guess, around the world. And I mean, I just looked on YouTube and saw you with John Williams, probably the quintessential film composer, and Perlman. And
Right.
what you must, like you have a favorite piece, perhaps. What are some of your favorite performances? Would that be one of them? It's certainly one of the highest. It's on YouTube, and it's one of the first ones that comes up. So I imagine that a lot of people have seen that.
Well, the performance with Perlman was a high point because obviously he's a very, very fine musician, and John Williams was conducting the Boston Pops, which is one of the best orchestras around. But it gave me a chance to do something that I had wanted to do, which is to have me playing violin next to Itzhak Perlman. I don't play violin at all. My brother was a violist, so I know how you hold the instrument and everything, but I don't play it at all. So we could do this gags like there's an orchestral introduction, and then Perlman plays this really flashy all over the place, and then you hear the same introduction leading up to me getting ready to play, and as soon as I start playing, the whole orchestra plays fortissimo, and you can't hear me at all, and so I'm just completely covered up, and there were all sorts of gags like that would only work with a really good musician next to you, and that was a lot of fun. And one time, another time we did something with Perlman was that I used to do annual concerts in New York City every Christmas time, the week between Christmas and New Year's. And one time I announced that I had found a fragment of a PDQ Bach violin concerto, and I said to our concertmaster, "Would you try reading it through?" And he said, "Oh no, I'm not reading in front of Carnegie Hall the first time, no." And I said, well, try to find somebody else. And Bill Walters, the stage manager, he went out and he came back in with Itzhak Perlman. And of course the house just came down. And Perlman got ready to play, and then finally we played the excerpt, and it's about 10 seconds long, and then it's over. But, and that was a terrific kick, because obviously who it was the whole joke, really, And I think we played the concert 3 times that year. He only could do it once, but it was great to have him.
Something just popped in my head. He was one of the most famous musicians in the world, Perlman. What about incongruous people, like a basketball or football star or something? Have you had anybody like totally out of the realm of music come in?
I can't think of anybody like that, except that with the Beethoven Sportscast, what it's called officially New Horizons in Music Appreciation, but we usually refer to it as the Beethoven Sportscast, calling the first movement of the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony as if it were a sporting event. And there's me, the announcer, and the color man, the other announcer. And so I have done it with Kurt Gowdy and Dick Ebersole and maybe 1 or 2 others. But as far as doing something purely musical, I did a 2-piano concerto from a PDQ Bach with Emanuel Axe, and that was a lot of fun. But mostly for the New York concerts, we had a sort of a batch of musicians that we used every year, and they would be up for anything that happened. If I passed out kazoos, they'd be glad to play kazoos, and if I asked the orchestra to sing, they'd be glad to sing. So that was a nice tradition that lasted, I don't know, 43 years or something like that.
What about, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, is there something that you, with your body of work, is there something that you haven't done yet that you want to do? Do you want to have Dennis Rodman do something? Do you want to or is there a piece, or is there something that you'd like to do that you haven't done yet?
I can answer that. There is one thing I would like to do with PDQ Bach that I've never been able to, and that's to have a movie. I've always wished there could be a movie of PDQ Bach's life, and Bill Walters and I, my stage manager, and I, sometimes we're on the road, we used to sit around and cast the movie. Who would be PDQ Bach and who would be Johann Sebastian Bach. We always thought that the head waiter, the head valet in the rich person's mansion would be Vladimir Horowitz, and it would be fun to do. But movies are very complicated things to do. I mean, you need to get a whole lot of ducks in a row, and I've never been able to do that. A lot of technical things you could do with a movie too. For instance, have somebody going like this on the piano and the sound goes down. I mean, some people think, some people wouldn't even realize what was wrong with that, but it'd be fun to do for the people to do.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting.
Is that Nick? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Hi. All right. Smile, you're on TV almost.
Heavy camera, actually.
Yeah.
How are you doing there? You've got lots of
Yeah, I like it.
space.
No,
Okay.
it's great. I like the free wheeling. I like that. If there's anything, if you want to continue on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple more. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'd like to hear you talk about actually the way the world is going with the digital realm, with the, you know, streaming this, streaming that, YouTube. How is it affecting musical education and how is it affecting families and musical education?
Well, I think that the technological
I'll wait for
I think
Nick
that
we'll wait for Nick to go up. So
Okay,
go ahead, go up. Yeah.
and I'll have a chance to figure out how to pronounce technological.
I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Actually, I probably turn my phone off, but not now. That's it. No one's calling me anymore. Yeah.
No one loves me.
I'm really the wrong person to act about technology because I'm the wrong person. I'm really the wrong person to ask about technology because I'm a complete dolt in that field. And it's not a philosophical thing. I'm not a Luddite who thinks there shouldn't be any. It's just that I'm lazy, and I happen to have an assistant, Michelle Eaton, who is very good at that stuff. So, like for instance, with email, I have the best of all possible worlds in that she only shows me the ones that I have to do something about, so I don't have to wade through all the other stuff. And similarly, I have a cell phone which I can use to make calls, but I can't do most of the things you can do on a cell phone because I've forgotten. It takes pictures, for instance, but I've forgotten how you do it. And so that whole aspect is not something that I know much about. It obviously is changing everything, and the way music is made available to people. But in terms of predicting how it's going to affect things in the future and stuff, I'm really not the guy to do it. I just sort of go along and at what I'm used to, and as I say, I still get commissions to come up with pieces for regular good old live performances, and so that's what I do.
That was my next question. Do you have any present Peter Schickley commissions as opposed to PDQ?
I'm working on. It's okay. Well, speaking of commissions, I'm working on a piece right now that's a commission, and it's a commission for basset, clarinet, and piano. And basset clarinet is a rare form of the clarinet that Mozart wrote for. He wrote his clarinet concerto and his clarinet quintet, some other pieces for the basset clarinet, which was, I think, invented by this clarinetist that Mozart liked so much, Stadler. And there's a guy who's getting a doctor's degree down in Florida, and he wants to increase the repertoire for the clarinet and the basset clarinet, so he's commissioned a piece, and that's what I'm working on right now at the moment. And I'm also working on a third symphony, so I'm kept busy.
Could you tell how many clarinet concertos are there? And I'm just thinking the comment you had with Julian about increasing the repertoire.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, we can just talk about that, about the comment about that. So.
Yeah. Well, people who play instruments for which there's not a large repertoire are very thankful for whatever repertoire they get. I have done a flute concerto, for instance, and an oboe concerto, and a clarinet concerto, and a bassoon concerto. The bassoon concerto has just been recorded out at Oberlin, and because bassoonists are just so grateful to get a concerto, because there's only one concerto that anybody ever plays, and that's by Mozart. And so if you come up with something for them to play, they're extremely grateful. And well, I sort of lost my track there.
Well, I think that you said it all right.
Okay,
there.
right.
Oh, I'm just looking at that one line about the funny line about the concerto for the one you're writing for the fellow. There's only 3 of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's all. That's the line I'm looking for. If you could, yeah.
Well, the basset clarinet, Mozart wrote his clarinet quintet and clarinet concerto for the basset clarinet. So this modern guy who is commissioning me for a piece, I think he wants to increase the repertoire for the instrument by 50%, and increase it from 2 pieces to 3. And I don't even know if that's all. He may be commissioning other people too, but anyway, I'm writing a piece for an instrument they're probably I'm writing a piece for an instrument that there are probably only a couple of dozen in the whole country, you know. But so I'm taking. Whoa!
Sorry.
Wow.
Oh, that's strange.
What was that?
Uh-oh.
It's the ghost that did the song.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's the ghost.
So terribly sorry about that.
Right, that's okay.
It's the basset horn.
Yes, right. Maybe it took
Could you actually do a piece with that?
took offense. I could.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. Can you, yeah, with that as a prop, we could use it as a fault. We'll talk about that.
That was very, very strange. Anyway,
But thank you. That's what I was looking for, the basket.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
I like that line. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else to fall? Everyone okay? You good?
what's next? Yeah.
Well, why don't you actually give me that, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like?
No, I
Both
think.
pieces or just-
Well, yeah, I'll take both pieces.
Okay.
So,
I was.
okay. So we were sitting here talking, and all of a sudden there was this crash behind me, and this thing fell down. And you see, when I look at this, I think, well, how could you play it? And the most possible way is as a brass instrument. Those are real notes. They may not be pretty notes, but they're notes. And this part, that's got a lot of possibilities, but it doesn't have much personality. We'll get rid of that one. But this one, I could either play this way, or I could put a tuba mouthpiece in there and make it a little bit easier to play. In a concert that I did last night here, I played my cane, for instance. I use a cane, and I just take the tip of the cane off the cane and put a trombone mouthpiece in there, and I can play that just as I did this. So there are a lot of things that people don't think of as musical instruments that can be played.
I could bring down tuba toothpaste.
Okay, we can do that too. Right.
Well, and unless you have something to
I
add.
don't know. That's thank you. Thank you for whoever knocked that off. That was perfect. Because that's again a nice introduction to the cane.
Yeah, right.
And the other comment I like when you said about the using the glove when I talked to you about the glove.
Yeah, oh, yeah, right.
In a more sometimes in a different audience. So let's talk about that. About just that's a cute little comment that may or may not make the thing. But can we just talk about that?
Yeah.
About using the glove versus the other.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
You recording? Oh, thank you.
We going?
Yeah. Anytime.
Yeah. I played bassoon for about 10 years. I never planned on becoming a bassoonist. I never even learned how to make reeds, but I played for it in junior high schools through college. And the great thing about playing bassoon is everybody always needs one. So I got to play in things that if I played flute or clarinet, they never would have taken me. They would have gotten somebody better. But one thing about the bassoon, about all woodwind instruments, is that if you play the lowest note, then all the air is coming out the end of the instrument. If you play higher notes, some of the air is coming out the holes that your fingers cover. But if you play the lowest note, it all comes out the end. So if you put something of a balloon-like nature up there, when you play the lowest note, it will inflate. And one of the most common things that bassoonists like to do at parties is to put a condom up there, and it inflates right up. Now, in public concerts, I probably couldn't get away with that, or at least not often. I suppose I might be able to do it at some colleges. But what I found is that if you use a surgical glove, one of those white latex gloves, that has also a sort of a delightful effect, and with much less possibility of serious lawful action.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's actually quite funny when all five.
Yeah, I know. I love the fingers. Yeah.
It's hilarious. It
Yeah.
was wonderful last night.
And one of the other things I love is that the deflation is funny too. You know.
Is there something, because I've got lots of what we want. I know what we're looking for,
Yeah.
what Tim and I are looking for in this. And is there something that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like one of the craziest stories to come out of PDQ, like something that we weren't expecting. Or
Well, let's see.
over the years, I mean, there must be.
Yeah.
The problem is there's so many years that you start forgetting it. It's
Yeah.
It's a blur, you know. What about like people coming back afterward that you wouldn't expect, like I don't know, like Kevin Costner comes back. Oh, I love your show. You know.
Jerry Stiller, he came back once. No, wait a minute, I just had one there.
Because if you're playing in New York all the time, you're playing Carnegie Hall, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of people, like Woody Allen. Is it
Right. Never. I mean, some people I happen to know, have been there and not come back. When they've come and presumably, I hope, enjoyed the show. But I know what I was going to say. I used to do, when my health was somewhat better, I used to do very extraordinary entrances. The show would always start out with Bill Walters, the stage manager, coming out and saying that the professor has not arrived yet. We're going to have to cancel the show. And then I would scream from the balcony, come down to the front of the balcony and say, oh, look, here's a rope, throw the rope over the balcony, and shimmy down the rope to the aisle, run down the aisle, belly flop onto the stage, jump over the podium and go over to the lectern and start talking. It's a great way to start a show. And I once was waiting for my cue. My cue is when Bill Walters says we're going to have to cancel the show. I was waiting upstairs, you know, in the wings of the balcony, as it were. And Bill was up there, and I looked out and I saw that where we had the rope coiled, and we had knots in it, so to make it easier to come down, that the rope was gone, and the rope wasn't there. And there was a young usher right beside me. And I said, wait, wasn't there a rope out there? He said, oh yeah, but don't worry, sir, I got rid of it. And so I had to, you know, really make tracks and run downstairs so that I could just run down the aisle. But there have been these confusions between reality and the comic act. I also was in another place. I was going to go up to the balcony to get ready to come down with a rope, and there was a door there that was locked, and I couldn't get in. So you have to be you have to be ready to think on your feet. My favorite entrance of all, the greatest entrance, not many halls would let me do it. Carnegie let me do it a couple of years. And that is when you're in those big halls, old ones like Carnegie, you have the stage here, and the balconies come around like that to the stage. And they once hung a rope up in the flies above the stage and put it up to the balcony, and I swang down like Tarzan from the balcony to the stage. And one of the great things about that entrance is that it's so scary that the rest of the show is just a breeze, you know. It's a terrific way to start a concert, and that's something that I actually learned in one of the very first concerts I did when, as a student at Aspen, that year that I studied with Mio. We put on a humorous concert, and I came off the balcony in the Wheeler Opera House in Aspen, and we recorded the show on a little Wallensack tape recorder. And when I listened to the tape afterwards, I realized that if you do something at the beginning of the show that's not only funny but also a little scary, that audiences just get loosened up and they'll laugh at anything. So that's what gave me the idea, I think, of making this as standard as I could. Some halls wouldn't let me do it. Some halls didn't have the right kind of balcony places, no place to tie the rope. And then towards the end of my touring days, everybody started worrying about insurance, so they wouldn't let me do it anyway. Yeah. So, but I had a good run there.
Yeah. Do you remember doing it in Ottawa at the Arts Centre?
Did I use the rope there?
I don't. You know what? It's Ottawa government town. They probably had to go through 5 levels of government.
Yeah.
I think I remember you running from the back. This is the 70s.
Yeah.
I remember you running from the back and belly flopping.
Yeah, that's what I did if I couldn't use the rope. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do remember that. That was. I was all excited because I saw PDQ Bach live in the 70s.
Right.
It was just shortly after I saw Monty Python live.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's.
I think that's we got what I
Okay.
was looking for.
Great.
Hopefully with when I talked to Jason and